What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are going to take a look at the Montreal Canadiens. As the Canadiens have had sort of an interesting summer, they've had a lot of reason to be excited. We're going to see some great young players either playing their first season in Montreal, their second great season in Montreal, hopefully. There's a lot to discuss. Is this the year that the Montreal Canadiens, make improvements? They get back to the playoffs like they did last year? Could they even get past the first round? We're going to discuss that here today. So let's take a look at some of the guys that are really going to be important to this team being able to continue where they left off last season and making sure they don't regress to missing the playoffs again this year. Obviously, at the top, Nick Suzuki, the captain. That's obviously where things are going to start. But there's a couple of other guys around Nick Suzuki that are also going to have to step up. We're going to see Cole Caulfield. He's going to continue to be a big goal scorer on this hockey team. That's going to have to continue. Yaroslav Slavkovsky, they made a big bet making this contract, and this could turn out to be a sweetheart contract that looks like some of those early Nathan MacKinnon contracts and Sidney Crosby contracts. Or it could blow up in their face, and we're going to find out pretty quickly here, depending on how things go, if this is a good deal or not. It's a very polarizing contract right now because I think there's people that are super hyped on Slavkovsky and believe in him and think this is a home run. And then there's the other side where people are like, well, he still has a little bit to prove. Did he really earn that kind of contract? So, with that being said, there's a couple of other guys here that are kind of, and we'll talk about this especially on the defense this year. There's going to be a lot of transition, I think, this year from guys that are top six forwards and top four defensemen, maybe losing a little bit of that role on this team and starting to become less of the focal point. And I kind of say that with guys like Brendan Gallagher and Josh Anderson, guys that were top six, bona fide top six forwards when they came into Montreal. And I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case by the end of this season in particular. And when you've got guys like Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook and Jake Evans and Ivan Demidov, these are the type of guys that are going to take away some of that ice time on the Montreal Canadiens forward group. And I think, again, you want to talk about someone that really is going to need to step up. A lot of people are excited for Demidov. The hype around Ivan Demidov is real. And he's going to have to find a way to make it work. And I do think he will. They have Oliver Kapanen on the roster as well. They just signed Joe Veleno last week. They've got Zach Bolduc, who they made in that trade with Logan Mailloux a couple of weeks ago. And then you have Sammy Blais, who they added in. So there's just a lot of interesting depth pieces on the Montreal Canadiens. But is it enough for them to get to the playoffs? So let's take a look at the defense first before we truly decide if this team is capable of getting back to the postseason. So, of course, the biggest acquisition this offseason for the Montreal Canadiens was adding Noah Dobson. That is a big contract at $9.5 million per season till 2033. But there is a way to look at this in the sense that the amount of young defensemen that the Montreal Canadiens have, even if Noah Dobson didn't turn out to be the best defenseman, right? They're treating him like a top pairing defenseman, which he could very well be. But on the Islanders, there was a lot of things in his game that made you wonder if that's really what he is. And I hate to say that, and it's not me giving sour grapes because he's no longer with the Islanders. I think he's a great defenseman. But I think there's a lot of things in his game that are very frustrating. And you leave yourself asking yourself, Dobson, what are you doing there? What was that? And it's frustrating because, again, he's a young defenseman. He's still learning, right? He's 25 years old. These are things within the next 6 years. He probably won't be doing these things anymore. But it is something that I've noticed with Dobson that is probably going to frustrate a fan base that puts everything in a microscope. And every little mistake Noah Dobson makes, I could see fans getting very frustrated if he continues to do some of those habits that carry over from the Islander days over to Montreal. It could be a little bit frustrating. You have Caden Gooley, who is a great defenseman as well, making almost half the salary of Dobson at $5.5 million per season. I think he's another great defenseman. He's probably going to fit into that top four again, taking away someone else's spot probably. You have Mike Matheson, who is on the final year of his contract, so he will be off the books next summer. I really like Matheson. I understand what they brought him in there for. It makes a lot of sense, but I think you're just again we're talking about some of these other young defensemen here. He's just going to lose a lot of ice time. That's just the reality of the situation. Same thing for Alex Carrier, who's 2 years left on his contract, so we'll see him a little bit longer in Montreal, but I don't expect it to last too long, especially when you have guys like Arbor Jackeye, Wi-Fi. He is going to hopefully be healthy this season. That was a concern last year. They almost traded him to the Islanders in a deal last year, and I wonder if that conversation came up at any point during the Noah Dobson talks. Very interesting move there. And then you've got Lane Hudson, who had the season of all seasons for defensemen last year. He was so good for the Montreal Canadiens. Completely changed the dynamic of that back end. Nobody saw that coming out. That came out of nowhere. Very talented player, and that right there is going to be a huge part of this team. As much as Noah Dobson coming in on this defense is a big deal, Lane Hudson doing similar to what he did last year, if not better, is going to be huge for the Montreal Canadiens. And then, of course, the last defenseman who is currently under arbitration. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with Jaden Struble. And once they figure that out, we'll see what happens. Again, more of a depth defenseman. He is 23 years old, but I don't see him as somebody that like make or break if he signs or how well he plays next season. Nothing against him, but I think we all kind of know that's kind of what we're looking at there with him. And then goaltending is another pretty big thing here, and that's Samuel Montembeault and Capo Kakinen. Is that good enough? Maybe. I think that was part of the issue for the Montreal Canadiens last year, but we've seen teams with worse goalie tandems go on some pretty deep playoff runs. So it does happen, but I think for the Canadiens, you definitely would have felt a lot better with going head to head with some of these teams with the best goalies in the league. You do want that extra support. Like, we know this guy can stand up 1-to-1 with this other goalie. They don't necessarily have that right now, but I think with what they have, they can make it work. And that's not necessarily a team that's going to go out and win a Stanley Cup, in my opinion, but that's a team that can put together a pretty good run and probably make the playoffs and maybe even win a round, depending on who they match up against. And that's kind of what I want to get to here, because I think the Montreal Canadiens are a competent team now. This is a team that they tasted that playoff success last year. Those fans felt that. This is a team that they not that long ago went on that run to the Stanley Cup final. Right? Like, it really wasn't that long ago. It's been 5 years now. They got that taste then. They got the taste of the playoffs again with this younger squad. This team has a bright future ahead of them. It's just a matter of everybody putting things together. Noah Dobson working out. Lane Hudson continuing what he did last year. Demidov for a full season doing what he did at the end of the season last year. And then just everybody has to do their part up front. Like, the big players on this team, the core pieces have to be performing. Because I don't think they have a ton of depth yet in order to have those guys slumping for a couple of weeks. And you're going to have growing pains. These guys are still young, right? I mean, the older players on this team that are not named, Michael Matheson, are all either in their mid to late to early 20s. And for the most part, they're in their early 20s. So you're just dealing with a lot of young guys that are still figuring things out. And when you're playing guys that have a lot of experience, maybe even size advantage on you, those types of things, you're just going to have to find a way to weather that storm. And it's going to be the maturity of the Montreal Canadiens that gets them through an 82-game schedule in 2025 into 2026, back to the playoffs in 2026. That is my prediction. I'll be doing a power rankings in the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to figure everything out, still waiting for a couple more shoes to drop, maybe seeing if there's maybe some more trades here or there before the end of the off season. But as of now, I like what the Habs kind of are cooking right now. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, want to see more content similar to this, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.